As you can see from the title of my presentation, it doesn't have a lot to do, apparently, with the rest of the talks of this meeting, but it does. It does in a sense, and just remember that I'm just a surgeon converted into a techie and now converted into a psychiatry apprentice. So you have to bear with me, and I will try to explain you what we have been doing during these last 10 years. And there's a list of a lot of people who has contributed to this work. Some of them are in this slide, some of them are not. Peter Yelowis has been the leader for most of this work during these 10 or 11 years. And we have had the fortune of having grants and support from many foundations and the Behavioral Health Center for Excellence and two recent Arrow grants from AHRQ. From 2006 to probably 2020, we have been working and will continue working on transcultural telepsychiatry across language barriers, which is one of the topics that we are most interested in, and we have an Arrow one for that one. The one I'm going to basically touch more today is a study which will run from a couple of years ago to 2020 also, which is the automated translation system for transcultural psychiatry. So we try to use the same patients to do several studies. I know everybody does that, so it's not bad. And I have just started a pilot of doing automated facial expression recognition for transcultural psychiatry. So the idea is that as we are videotaping all the patients that we use in these studies, we can also use these videos to try to recognize the expressions and how they manifest different feelings during these interviews. I have the equipment and I'm working on the pilot. And my next step would be to, one of my passions behind technology is virtual reality. So I have been working on this for several years. I have been also fortunate to get quite a bit of equipment for this. And I would like now to begin a study in which we want to do augmented reality representations of visual and auditory hallucinations, so that we can teach people who is in training and also the parents of patients with psychosis what being hallucinating is. And we prefer, or I prefer to use for this augmented reality instead of virtual reality, because in virtual reality you are in a virtual world and it's like being in a movie. If you're using augmented reality, you are in this room, you are looking this room in, and you have the hallucination inside of the room. So that's the next step, but I need to buy some FTE out of my teaching to be able to do this. Come, are you listening? All right, the problem is extensive. We have heard these figures today several times. I'm not gonna do a lot of it, but 4.7% of the population in this country has limited English speaking capacity. And this limited is maybe sometimes absent English speaking capacity, and they need to be treated. According to the 2010 US Census, 21% of the people living in the country either speak only a different language than English, or they have different combinations, but they cannot go to the doctor and have a good conversation and treatment plan. We saw this also this morning, that in the Los Angeles school district you have 94 different languages to deal with, while in Sacramento County we have 90. So it is a weird problem. And these are the most frequent, and we are initially tackling Spanish because it's the most frequent of all, and we think that once we can tackle Spanish, we can tackle the rest of them. So this is the one we are working with, and this is the old practice of medicine in which a patient is seen by a provider and they speak a different language. What happens? Nothing happens. They cannot communicate unless they have an ad hoc interpreter, which it used to be a parent of the patient or a sister and even grandchildren of the patients. where to consult. Hopefully this is not happening anymore. I think it's unlawful now to do it, but that was the old practice. The current practice still includes something like this: a patient who speaks Spanish and a doctor who thinks he speaks Spanish. And that's a real problem. That can be dangerous. That can be dangerous. So in order to try to solve this, I am teaching 3/4 of each year a class which is called, a class for credit, for 2 credits each quarter, which is called Clinical and Cultural Spanish. The class is packed with students from the School of Medicine, the School of Nursing, and the School of Public Health. And the idea is not to teach them medical language or medical terminology in Spanish, because it's the same. They're cognates. They come from Greek or from Latin, and they just have to change the termination of the words in order to speak them in Spanish. What I'm trying to teach them, and I have people helping me to do this, is to teach them how to talk to patients in Spanish. How to ask a patient from Honduras or from the north of Mexico or from Puerto Rico if they have diarrhea, which is different. That's what we're trying to do in this class, and students love it. They pay me lunch twice a month just to hear me talk to them in Spanish, so I think they like it. Current practice is also around using live interpreters, which is great. They are amazing. And places like UCLA, like UC Davis, we can have for the patients this luxury of having live interpreters to do this job. But many places don't. Many places don't have this capacity, and there must be some other ways to do it. Even so, using interpreters costs a lot of money. They are expensive. They charge a lot of money to do interpretation. It is time consuming. The consultations take up to 60% more time than if an interpreter is not used, because it's going back and forth. And I think that the worst, quality is also a problem. And probably in quality, the worst problem is that the relationship between the provider and the patient is interrupted. And if it's mental health, that's a big problem, especially with some groups of people. So current solutions: we have live interpreters, we have phone interpreters, we have video conference interpreters. They are great, they are amazing. But we have little information about the accuracy of live interpretation, and there's a lot of variability, and there you can see it. And I have worked closely with interpreters in Spanish in UC Davis, and it's interesting that when they have been living here for more than 20 years or 20 years, they don't speak Spanish anymore. They speak American Spanish, and that is also a difference. That's another problem that is there to solve. So we think that machine translation has a similar levels of accuracy in a clinical setting. It can be as good as live interpreters. It can be as reliable, but we have to still work a lot of it out. The ultimate goal would be to analyze language as data, not as language, but as data. Create new clinical processes for in-person care and telemedicine using these technologies. Create a better standard of care with improved interpreting, more efficiency, and less expensive. So, in this project that we are doing about asynchronous, which is also called store and forward telepsychiatry, this is the workflow, the main workflow. We have a provider which thinks that a patient needs a mental health consultation, but the patient is in Tulare, and there's no mental health consultation in Tulare. So the surgeon has to go to Tulare and make an interview, a psychiatric interview, to this patient in Tulare and record it on video. And then this video recorded interview is put on a web server, and the psychiatrist in Sacramento, when he or she can go to the server, can do a diagnosis and a treatment plan, which he sends back to the provider of this patient. That's the way in which store and forward telepsychiatry works, and it really works. We have been doing it for 10 years now, and this is the beginning. This is us going to Visalia and Tulare to make arrangements to do this, and after this I made like 25 trips to the Central Valley, and so 150 patients there, about 70% of them in Spanish and the rest in English. So it was really interesting, but we had a problem that those consultations that were done in Spanish, we didn't have enough psychiatrists to look at those videos and make the diagnosis and treatment plan, because we wanted to give results of these consultations in less than a week. So it was tough. But then we began to think, well, how about if we translate those interviews? And these two images show what we did next. The one on the top shows me interviewing an English-speaking patient. The problem was hers, to understand my English, so she had a problem, not me. And the one on the bottom is me interviewing a Spanish-speaking patient, and then what we did was subtitle this and give it to an English-speaking psychiatrist with subtitles, and they loved it. They loved it because they could read what the patient was saying in English, but they could also hear her voice, her intonation, and her emotion. So they loved this, but this is very time-consuming. And it's a lot of labor to do this, so it's not practical. Unless the systems, which we are getting there also in this area, the systems should be good enough to transcribe from one language to text, then translate, and then do the subtitling and in an automated fashion. This is coming. YouTube is working hard. So, what are we doing now with automated translation? And I'm not going to get into the details of this because it's kind of techy. It includes machine learning techniques, it includes natural language processing, it includes a lot. Fortunately, programs like Dragon, naturally speaking, which you might have used in the clinic or in your office, is now has an engine that can learn from itself. It is a deep learning engine, so it can learn from itself, and it can do pretty good transcriptions if the pronunciation of the people speaking Spanish is correct. That's still a problem, but it's getting there. Then we use machine learning techniques and other artificial intelligence methods to have these interviews translated and then placed on a server. And what we're trying to do in this study, which is sponsored by HRQ, is to compare the transcripts to assess accuracy. That's the transcript by a human and the transcript by the machine. Then we are comparing diagnoses between two different psychiatrists of these transcripts and translations, and then we are comparing time and cost of it. So we have been, this is a busy slide, you don't need to read what's on it. These are the different software developing kits for automatic translations that we have been using. And we have settled down to use Microsoft, not because we think it's the best one. We think Google is the best one. But Microsoft has the advantage that it can be HIPAA compliant, because it can be in a server which is HIPAA compliant and Google is not. So unless that is solved, we will be using Microsoft. We work a lot with this type of transcripts. That's an interview of a patient, and that's the original language of the patient. This is the target language translated by a human, and this is the target language translated by a computer. And we have been doing this computer translation with several different translation engines, and we are comparing those to see the results. We can find errors of omission, addition, substitution, false fluency, and other errors in these translations, and that's the part which we are analyzing to decide which way to go. This is just an example of two interpreters, two human interpreters, which have been reviewing these transcriptions done by the computer and how they can find different things in the accuracy of those translations. And we are also using BLUE, which is the bilingual evaluation understudy, which is an automated tool also to do this grading of automatic translations. So it is all coming together, and it will be possibly in the near future to have, and we have envisioned this in many ways. We started working with Google Glass, trash, don't ever use them, they don't work. So Google Glass was a nice attempt, but if you try to read something textual in Google Glass, it wasn't possible. Resolution was almost zero. So they took it out of the market, and Google is working on Google Glass 2, version 2, which is supposed to be much better. But what we are envisioning now is that the patient will have an earbud in one ear, and the provider is going to have an earbud in one ear, and we're going to have a computer or a tablet which is going to do all the process of translation from one language to another. So the provider can be speaking in English, the patient can be speaking in Hmong, and they can be understanding each other immediately, live. So that's the goal, and that's what we are aiming to do in the next 3 years. And the implications of this, I think this is my last slide, is that language applications can be incorporated in both asynchronous and synchronous telemedicine videos, encounters, and workflows. So it's not only for telemedicine, it can be used in day-to-day clinic work. Not all translation apps are alike. There's some significant difference, and some of them are very bad, and they are being sold. And these apps are already being used in commercial industries, so they are being used in the United Nations and stuff like that. So why wouldn't us be able to use them in medicine? We will have to work a lot on the dictionaries to give them the terminology, and then we will have to work a lot in making these computers understand the cultural differences of the languages and to translate the language including those cultural differences. But it can be done. Okay.